Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for stepping into the Foul Playland. As always, I'm your Foul Player. Wanted to make this quick New York Mets video regarding the transfer of ownership from the Wilpon faction over to billionaire 14 times over, Steve Cohen. And some news that has come out that Steve Cohen has made a statement that if and when he gets possession of the team and approval by 23 of the 29 owners or other owners, that he plans on making Sandy Alderson, the once GM of the Mets, the president of baseball operations for our New York Mets. Being that Steve Cohen buying the team is kind of like old news now, and I didn't cover it because life gets in the way. But I wanted to cover more of the recent story, and that is the appointment by default given from Steve Cohen for Sandy Alderson to run the baseball operation. When you talk of terms of getting the approval of 23 of the owners, I think appointing Sandy Alderson, a baseball guy to the core, somebody who's been in baseball operations since 1984, I believe, somebody who has that pedigree, I think that alleviates some of the tension and gives the owners a level of comfort knowing that a baseball lifer is going to be at the helm of the Mets when this new owner, who's going to be the richest owner in baseball, takes over. Maybe this baseball lifer and Sandy Alderson could pull the reins on a newfound owner in Steve Cohen when he gets into his position as the owner of the Mets. Having said all that, I think that it's a smart move in that sense. Maybe if an owner was on the fence and having this maverick billionaire owning a team for the first time, maybe they'll having Sandy Alderson at the helm will kind of soften that blow, and maybe it'll give them confidence to vote and approve of Steve Cohen owning the team, with them knowing that somebody who's well known within the baseball ranks in MLB is going to be assuming the position of president of baseball operations. Now, as far as a lot of people, I think are assuming that Sandy Alderson it will become the GM of the Mets, or somebody close to Sandy Alderson will eventually become a GM of the Mets once Steve Cohen purchases the team. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think that this move was made now with that in mind, the fact that maybe Brody Van Wagenen is not going to be the GM going into 2021 if Steve Cohen ultimately gets to purchase his team. And I personally hope that's the case. I don't think that Brody Van Wagenen did a morbid job as a GM. I actually like the draft picks that he made, and I'd venture out to say that I actually like the draft picks that he made even more than Sandy Alderson. The one thing with Sandy Alderson was that while he was the GM of the Mets, that he was also hamstrung by the Wilpons being cheap. There was a lot of moves that I think Sandy Alderson would have been down to make had he had the fiscal capability to do so. And that fiscal capability comes from the Wilpons, and the Wilpons were always very cheap. I think a lot of people were annoyed when Sandy Alderson would mention the fact that more fans should come to the park, and that would give the Mets the ability to make moves. But how often do you hear a GM say something like that? I think that those marching orders probably came from the Wilpons and backfired with the fans rather than made fans go to the park more. I think that was like one of the worst years I remember around that time frame where Sandy Alderson pleaded with the fans to come to the park more in the hopes that the Wilpons would have a trickle down effect with their money and make moves with that newfound bit of money. But this also affected the draft a lot. I think we drafted above and under slot. I mean, or under slot a lot of times, and took players that were more signable because the Wilpons were being cheap, and I think that affected our draft a lot. I mean, hopefully, Sandy Alderson does a better job drafting. I mean, I think his last pick was Dominic Smith, and I think, and Dominic Smith's been a beast thus far. No, his last pick was Dominic Smith, maybe, but and Dominic Smith has been all that he was promised to be when he was drafted. Dominic Smith was the best player as a hitter in that draft, or being touted as, and it just started materializing last year, and he really went over the edge this year. But one thing I will say with Sandy Alderson was his ability to make good trades. I mean, or acquire players like DeGrom. Trying to think who else was a slick acquisition by uh, by Sandy. But Matt, for example, I mean, we got when we traded when he traded Beltron for Wheeler. And Wheeler's a top level pitcher now. I think in that offseason maybe he could have traded Reyes as well, but that's neither here nor there because we ended up getting Wheeler out of that equation. But Sandy does have a good nose for trading players and for the comings and goings of and what's happening in the league. Way better than Brody Van Wagenen does. I think the biggest thing against Brody Van Wagenen, mind you, I actually like the fact that he is a good drafter in my mind, even though that hasn't materialized yet. But as far as seeing what these players could do at the MLB level, but the biggest strike against him was the fact that he traded away Matt Kellenic, or Kellenic. I don't know if his first name is Matt, but he traded Kellenic for Robinson Cano and Edwin Diaz. I mean, I think Edwin Diaz has shown what he could do thus far, but the fact that we're going to be hampered with that Cano contract, they could have given us one of the best prospects in all of baseball, and it still hurts, But then when you factor that we got a reliever back at the end of that, I mean, now he's our closer, and he has played really well towards the latter portion of this year in Edwin Diaz. But the fact that we got to carry that $24 million a year Robinson Cano salary for 3 more years is a big strike against Brody Van Wagenen. And I mean, like, a lot of people think that you could just pay over the salary cap every year and it doesn't matter, but it actually does, because the salary cap is always going to be around that $200 million threshold. Not salary cap, but where you're going to start having to pay into the luxury tax. And you don't want to just give teams money willy-nilly for going over the luxury tax and having a Robinson Cano take up 1/8 of that $200 million almost. It's a big deal. And then, like, look at how the Mets are currently situated now, in that you have Pete Alonso, who could possibly pay the DH if we keep a DH, but then you have Robinson Cano, who some people think is a good fielder. Robinson Cano is a smooth fielder if you hit the ball right to him, but Robinson Cano has 0 in terms of range. Robinson Cano's range stinks, and you need that as a second baseman. But if Robinson Cano could be the permanent DH, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the fact that we had to play Robinson Cano at second base hurts us in the right side of that infield. And I think it may have not helped Ahmed Rosario in his development as a fielder. But, eventually we're also going to have to pay guys like Michael Conforto really soon. We're going to have to pay, or at least decide on, keeping Matt. I don't think they will. Maybe they would. I mean, depending on how next year goes. But you also may have to add a few years to the Grom's contract, and this is all going to happen during the time in which you have the contract of Robinson Cano kind of over our heads. I mean, personally, I hope that they could get rid of Robinson Cano's contract, maybe trade and eating some of the money. I mean, I don't know how much it would take, but if we're not near contention next year, maybe a dollar average of 8 million per year eating off that contract. Maybe they could pay next year outright for some team to take him, which would equate to 8 million per year of the 3 years we have left. 8 times 3 is 24, and see if we could get rid of that contract. Maybe with the newfound DH position that the MLB hopefully puts into play for National League teams next year, maybe a team would be willing to take on Robinson Cano as a part-time or primary DH and not field him. I mean, maybe it'll cost less than that. Maybe you could pay 6 million per year. But these are things that Brody Van Wagenen laced us with, and a lot of people think that it may have had to do with the fact that Robinson Cano was his client when he was an agent at CAA, I believe. Maybe it did, but nevertheless, even if Brody Van Wagenen gets the door next year, we still got to live with that Cano contract in the midst of losing what looks like one of the best prospects in all of baseball. I think last I checked, they had him ranked like at number 6 in some polls and number 9 in other polls or other rankings. In Kelenic, and Kelenic is a might turn out to be a center fielder. We need a center fielder next year maybe. I mean, we definitely need a center fielder unless we want to plug in, Nimmo into that position. Moving forward, I don't think they do. But Kelenic would have been somebody that would probably be playing for us next year. But he's on Seattle while we get Robinson Cano back in that deal. But let me know what you guys think. I'm glad to be back. I'm gonna try to come back more, man. And if you could check out the Nick and Steph show. It's another Facebook channel with two fine young men that I know. Pause. From our days at WKRB 90.3 here in New York City. Nick and Steph are uber talented when it comes to the sports talk, and you've seen Steph in some of my shows talking this sports. And I hope you guys please subscribe to my channel, of course, but take time to subscribe to the Nick and Steph show as well. They're doing really good things, and they're consistent with it, coming on every day. And I'm glad to see that they're on the come up in the world. But with that, I'm out. Thank you for stepping into the Foul Playland with me. Peace.